An imposing librarian rushed to the side of Archeo, standing watch as my tech priest deftly disassembled the golden power armor, and threw the golden pieces towards me. I waved an armed sentinel to pick up the irregular armor for me. "Now, Astartes, what should I do with your traitor chapter?" I asked Ludvius in a soft voice. While I never claimed to be an inquisitor, I did carry a rosette, and Ludvius knew exactly who gave it to me, as he has been in the bedroom when I gifted Rose her children. In this case, politics made excellent bedfellows. The veteran looked with pity at his deluded battle brothers. "You will do what is best, like you always do, Lord Pef. Even the sacred spear doesn't harm you one bit." Right, I still had that idiot stuck to my spear. "Captain Thracius, head and heart if you will. We don't need a great demon to spring out and maybe ruin my excellent canticle." Two loud bangs sounded, as the phase iron bolts struck the traitor, with bone-shattering energy and psycho inhibitor effect. Should be enough. I withdrew the spear and stood ready to strike, but nothing arose from the shattered brain and chest of the excommunicated Inquisitor. "Every one of you Astartes, come and taste the truth. Guardsmen, about face and return to barracks," I yelled through my vox box attached to my helmet, then tapped my helmet with my free hand. Ludvius reacted promptly and took off my helm, and locked it to my belt. The Scythe's captain advanced first and scooped a tiny piece of brain, then ate it. Space Marines could indeed absorb memories this way, which made quite a great way for fact-checking. Sure, there was also torture and Mechanicus mind downloads, but the Inquisition would know how to protect their own, with implanted mental defenses and mind mazes. He soon scowled and spat in disgust. Malphalax. The fool sold his soul to a demon. I remembered that bit, but not everything. It wouldn't matter though. "They are still not listening, Sergeant Ludvius. Oh well. I guess we're visiting Bale next. I still have that golden torpedo," I announced with distaste, then turned around and began walking away. My words possibly remembered the Blood Angels that their autonomy and powers were still at the behest of the Imperium. And Astartes did have good hearing. They had just elected not to obey. Captain Thracius ran after me, just as I began flipping the rosette like a coin. "Lord Lancefire, wait. They are tasting the truth, now," he spoke hastily. I didn't stop, but instead returned the rosetta to its protective casing at my back. "Isn't this spear supposed to be heavy and too hard to use?" I asked instead, trying a few left-handed stabs at the air. The Ogrins saluted with their own adamantium staves, probably thinking something stupid. "Guard the hangar door, brave soldiers of the Emperor. Nobody is allowed in my ship, unless I say so," I commanded them via the vox beads implanted in their inner ears. Leaving the Blood Angels stranded in the hangar, I rushed towards my sentinels carrying the loot. "Deposit everything separately, item by item at the vault entrance. I'll send the tech priests to purify the items if it is needed. Do not touch them with hands or anything organic." "Roger that, Captain. Nice spear too," a Katakan pilot replied irreverently. Almost like they were raised in a jungle. Wait. They were. More pilots started hooting and describing my bravery, although I did nothing of that sort. Well, except stealing the spear from a demoralized Astartes and stabbing a sleeping man. Well, legends were formed like that. In 1,000 years, the myths might I say I slayed a dragon and an angel wept. On the way, I did encounter some tech priests and had my orders transmitted up the chain, then to the relevant priests with the specific database knowledge, chaos artifacts and purification. The cult Mechanicus was still a religion at the base, and thus their prayers and rituals worked, because 1,000,000,000,000 tech priests believed they worked. They also had more practical experience, due to their forge worlds being constantly attacked by nearly every enemy possible. The missile corvettes and destroyers will soon change that, and hopefully reduce the Imperium's dependence on capital ships for defense. After Shenlong, I wouldn't return to the Empire. My sons and daughters will still trade and exchange goods, but getting involved in politics would place me in the sights of more corrupt individuals with immense power. Bluffing once might have worked, but it wouldn't work again. 100 tech priests from a dozen Clades arrived to examine and sanctify my loot, and quickly separated a few valuable relics that I could use. A rosarius, looking like belt buckle with a griffin on it. Basically a portable faith-based force field, with minor defense unless you were a true believer, in which case it could tank Titan-class weapons. A ring, with a wolf paw on the signet, which could detect movement and sounds for 100 meters and alert the user. Another ring, with a monkey face with long canines, could fire once with a last cannon beam. The priests didn't know how to recharge it. Very likely Xenotech. An Inquisitor-coded book, with agents and informants and secret routes. Very useful for Rose, no doubt. The big staff itself, acting like a psychofocus and a shield barrier against other psychers. Nice, but I lacked that gene myself. Rose maybe. The rosette and its covering case, disguised as a holy book. The other rosette was coded to the traitor and will have to be sent to Terra. The case was a null box, so it could even tank battleships' lances, for 1,000,000 years. I kept the bookcase, of course. It was more precious than my battlecruiser. Perhaps I could mount the box on my chest, as a heart plate. Would look a bit bulky, but I had battleship strength enemies. And I could store stuff inside as well, so win-win. The golden power armor was artificier grade, and had everything a space marine could want. Well, except the wings flap, which will need to be covered, as I lacked wings. The Inquisitor power armor was same grade, but didn't require a black_carapace organ to use, nor Astartes muscles and size. Confiscated as battle loot from boarding actions. Then a dozen more mundane weapons, knives, poisons and garrote wire, truth serums and chemical sprays with euphoric and paralyzing effects, bolter, inferno pistol, dart thrower, grappling hook, a few grenades with various effects, from viruses to vortex and incendiary. The guy had been loaded and armed for bear. But he didn't use what the Inquisition trained him to, instead he relied on psycho powers and his Astartes escort. Captain, some red Astartes are making noise at the hangar door. Permission to ventilate? A Katakan officer wondered as his buddies in the armed sentinels whirred their chainsaws loudly in the background. Not yet, Major. I'll be right there soon. I spoke calmly and directed the priests to store the good loot in the vault, including the nicest spear ever. What do you want to do with these foul items, Captain? The priest asked me, pointing at some red candelabra and other ritual items. I hummed deep in thought. Can they be melted into bolt rounds? Might be nice to have something that harms Eldar souls. The priests all stopped to stare at me. They would go straight to hell, Lord Pef. The foul Immaterium demons would feast on their souls. One of them said a bit wary. I nodded and walked away. 100 rounds then. Eject what's left into the sun. It was time to receive my own Astartes company, like I always wanted. A short trip on the elevator saw me adjusting the Rosarius on my belt. I wouldn't tank even a night with my feeble faith, but Astartes were 2 steps lower on the danger scale, with dreadnoughts and sentinels in between. I was probably safe, unlike the faithless Inquisitor. I mean, even an angel came to my help once, although I surely repaid the debt by killing Lorga and saving him another frayed body or soul. You seem curiously happy, going to meet a hostile company of blood angels. Captain Thracius commented after checking his bolter again. You should be too, my friend. I bet you have never killed an Inquisitor before, right? I asked rhetorically. You never heard of people offing full Inquisitors? Those guys could battle demon princes in hand-to-hand. Chaff like a rogue trader wouldn't even register as a threat. Then I arrived at the hangar deck, and pushed through the angry guardsmen who were ready to open up on the Blood Angels with melter guns and crack missiles. And possibly other weapons not registered. It's the captain. Make way, wanna get roasted by accident? Now these traitors will pay. I emerged among the huge ogrins, all holding their adamantium shields and staves menacingly. Good jobs, big guys. Let me talk with your smaller cousins. I spoke on the Vox speed and stepped out as the ogrins made a path for me. Lord Lancefire, we were deceived. The librarian began in a pleading tone. I know you were, Astartes. You don't seem very sorry though, threatening my people and all. I spoke while walking right in his face. Perhaps we could talk in private, Lord Lancefire? He begged in a softer tone. I nodded and walked past him. Margus, you found the source? I asked my biologist expert, standing over a slightly dissected Archeo. "It is not curable, Captain. In fact, it has been getting worse since the traitor died," he explained while waving a tentacle for urgency. I turned towards the librarian, who seemed to be in charge. "Take him to your barge. I would offer him mercy, but I don't have any. May the Emperor save his soul." "May I ask you to accompany us? The captain asks every minute to speak to you. And Brother Ludvius," he whispered in a low voice. "Captain Thracius, you are to return to Ultramar and enact revenge." "If I don't return," I commanded and patted his shoulder. "As you say, Lord Pef. There will be no place for the traitors to hide." He spoke sternly and departed without looking back. I ignored the outraged looks of the Blood Angels and walked on, and entered their nice Stormbird lander. I could use a few more like this one. Nobody made them, like they did in the old days. The battle barge was named Belus, which meant pretty or cheerful, in High Gothic. Also, a pun for war. Their brother Captain Idion was leading the 6th Company, and awaited me as the transport landed in their much larger battleship-class barge. "Lord Lancefire, we have been tricked by that corrupt warp spawn of an Inquisitor," he began in a meek voice and fell to one knee. Well, there were only Blood Angels around, and they too followed their captain, with the librarian visibly struggling to bend his knee in rage. "I am not an Inquisitor, Astartes. Out in the fringe, my warrant as a rogue trader already says I speak with the voice of the Emperor. But, I find a Rosetta very helpful when traveling the Imperium, filled as it is with treachery and corruption. Like today, for example," I announced in a loud voice, and waved them to their feet. So, the Exterminatus was just an empty threat? I would say it worked wonders. The man replied in a relieved voice, and stood straight again. I just turned towards Ludvius. He knows me better. "Captain Idion. Lord Pef did enact Exterminatus on the chapter homeworld of the Scythes of the Emperor. And a few days ago, he killed Lorga, the traitor. I have seen it myself," my bodyguard proclaimed proudly. "It did have an effect, as claiming valorous deeds by yourself was common among the nobles of the Imperium. Having a brother confirm it as a witness, was different. Especially a veteran sergeant." The captain nodded cautiously and went to examine their corrupted brother Archeo. Pustules of infected flesh were spreading along the spine, and the taint would be palpable to those with psychic powers. The librarian shook his head in defeat, and signaled something with his fingers. "No recovery possible, most likely." "Oh, you idiot Archeo. What did you do?" The man lamented in a mourning voice, then his hand flashed, decapitating the sick Astartes and ending his suffering. May the Emperor grant him mercy. "Back to your posts, Astartes. Don't just stare like it's a picked show. You will all die one day, and probably in worse ways," I shouted, pointing at the gawking spectators. Now it worked, and the lower ranks rushed away inside the barge. "I will cremate the remains. Too bad about the genocide." The librarian spoke gently and gathered the deceased Marine and left with him. I waited till it was only me and Idion, who cleaned his power sword while murmuring prayers. "Take me to the bridge, Captain. We have a Forge world to save, and my fleet spent all munitions already," I demanded after a polite minute. The captain nodded and took the lead. "Those destroyers of yours, they seem very potent for such small vessels." We entered an elevator that should take us to the bridge deck. I lost one Los Angeles destroyer already. But the sacrifice has been well paid, I'd say. 2 minor Chaos fleets, plus that Primarch and an Enslaver. I admitted with a heavy heart. In truth, most of my losses have been to Chaos, both ships and family members, with the largest casualties at Estobon. They were indeed the great enemy. Not so minor fleets, Captain Idion. A dozen universe conveyors filled with troops and a battleship with its escort group. 1,000 times the mass of Lord Pef's fleet was sunk in a few days. Ludvius explained after a snort. The Astartes captain focused on me with new eyes. "I have heard of your fantastic exploits, though nothing solid. You always seem to appear at the worst time then vanish again." I smiled and shrugged. It was my intention after all. The Navy doesn't like being proved idiots, and they always try to confiscate my ships. Not to mention the Astartes, who always want to injure me, for some unknown reason. The Adeptus Auroritas also chase me, and now an Inquisitor. I fear I ruined some carefully planned plots with my mere presence. Ludvius chuckled and leaned on the elevator's wall and just nodded at his captain. All true. The chaplain of those scythes even punched him in the jaw. Took him a few months of bedtime to recover. Might be your blank aura, Lord Lancefire. Psychers are rather annoyed by that. The Blood Angel's captain mused to himself. I nodded wisely. Probably so. Or I was just annoying. Soon we reached the bridge, the door guarded by a few sanguinary guards, with golden power armor. I just walked ahead and sat in the captain's chair, linking my mind to the throne controls of the battle barge. The machine spirit was ancient and loyal, and rather surprised at my inopportune visit and usurpation. But I trusted my luck and the genes gifted by the Sanguiner. If I could wield that sacred spear, which should have annihilated an unworthy carrier, then a simple warship couldn't be so tough. I was wrong. I mean, right, because I lived. But the pain and resistance from the spirit was 1,000 times stronger than even the canticle. Calm down, Belus. We have a mission, and I have a rosette with me. Don't make me use it on you. I sent towards the angry spirit. Slowly, the resistance ceased, and the ship's functions opened for me. It must have taken only a second, even if the pain lasted years of subjective time. Lord Lancefire. It's dangerous. I heard the captain yell in surprise. Ouch. A bit painful, like all command chairs. But not dangerous for me. Now let me see what I can do with Belus. Torpedoes, over 500. Good enough. Batteries, bombardment cannons, fighters, dropships, drop pods. Oh well. At least the void shields are strong. We can use that. I commented while powering up the holoscreen and marking the siege fleet by priorities. 2 enemy battleships, 9 cruisers, 30 destroyers. Should be easy. A decent fleet, but I had a battleship of my own now. On loan. Wenchen, I'll have the Belus close in for torpedo transfer. Have the sentinels ready to assist with logistics. I voxed towards the canticle. Then I switched channel to the escorts. Yorvis, bring the destroyers about and line the up for reload. Corvettes, Paternomicron and auguries to full. Then I proceeded to do so, carefully balancing vectors to perform the docking maneuver, without breaking the fragile legs inside. I take it you will remain on the Belus for now, Captain? I heard Thracius ask in a suspicious voice. I thought for a moment, then glanced at the Astartes captain. I think I will, Thracius. These flesh-eating cannibals might not follow orders again, and ruin my awesome battle plan. Then, I might lose a battle. Can you imagine that? I asked rhetorically. Thracius laughed as if I said a good joke. I'll safeguard the bridge here. The Emperor protects. We're not cannibals. I heard a meek voice from Idion, while the bridge crew stared at me with concern and anger. I waved his fake and untrue complaint away. They did just eat a man's brain, only an hour ago. Quiet on the bridge. I'm working here, I demanded in a command voice. The bridge fell silent, as I focused on the delicate piloting of a battleship, only with my weak brain and the savant implants. About an hour later, the lumbering battle barge finally matched vectors and docked with the canticle, so I stood up and stretched my tense back. Torpedo armory next, I demanded in a flat tone. Captain Idion grunted and took the lead again, while Ludvius grinned and held his thumb up for success. On the elevator, the Astartes glared at me for a whole minute. The Belus is gene-coded for the Blood Angels chapter. Even with that rosette, you shouldn't be able to control the machine spirit. I know, right? Must be a miracle from the Emperor. I explained with a careless shrug. It's more than that. Our astropaths contacted Lord Commander Dante on bail. We were ordered to guard your life at all cost. He wondered in a doubtful tone. They were? Perfect. I'll hold you to that, Astartes. Brother Ludvius keeps trying, but a barge and this Astartes company around me would work better. I keep getting in trouble, for no reason at all. I complained in a meeker voice. Ludvius just nodded. You shouldn't kick a world eater in the balls next time, Captain. Or any space marine. Nor punch one in the face. And you need better armor and weapons. My bodyguard advised me seriously. I sighed in defeat. I'll get better, I promise, I murmured softly. Just needed to finish the slow transition to my new body. Reloading torpedoes is quite difficult, even in dock. The things are very big and thus heavy. In fact, if you empty the warhead out and weld some seats, it becomes a 50-meter spaceship called a boarding torpedo. Luckily, I had armed sentinels and servitors to help, and transferring 300 torpedoes didn't take very long. Just a single day. Meanwhile, I continued repairs and had the tech priests prepare my new power armor, by painting the horrible gold over, with my house colors, green and blue. Possibly a reminder of terror, before it became a yellow dust ball. When I emerged in my awesome armor, I felt much stronger and safer, especially with the null box replacing the ceramite plate on the chest. I kept my rosette and a few rings inside, also some spare cash and a Vox speed, just in case I was left stranded somewhere. On my hip I had a bolter pistol, with thrice blessed, cursed and phased bolt magazines, also my trusted power dagger, a few grenades and my Rosarius. Felt much better and looked great, so win-win. Lord Pef, you look dangerous now, Ludvius said, turning towards me and nodding approvingly. Compared to a puppy, I probably was. Another veteran blood angel had joined my friend as my close guard. His name was Rothan. I checked him out for a second. Guarding me will be a lifelong and boring job, Astartes. Plus, you may see things not meant for lesser minds. Thus, you need 7 implants. So I've been told, Lord Lancefire. But I don't believe it will be boring. The new bodyguard answered in a cheeky tone. I waved his claims away. Captain Idion is on the bridge? Not yet, my lord. The cremation of Accio has most of our brothers occupied. He answered with a frown. I sighed and began heading towards the bridge. Time to settle the score, and wipe out the traitors. The leader of this word-bearer fleet was someone called a Dark_Apostle, second in command to Lorga and bitter enemy of the Blood Angels. It was time to convert his mass into energy. Soon enough, the fleet was underway, slower than usual, because barges are by definition very slow. Set all sensors to autistic mode, I commanded towards the Auspex console. The neophyte blinked at me in confusion. Damn it. No wonder these Astartes ships were always being boarded, and they had huge fights among delicate machinery. I leaned into the command chair and simply turned off all sensors and Auspex consoles from the override control in the chair. Not like I actually needed a big crew, with such a potent machine spirit for navigation and targeting. Torpedo room, load a vortex torpedo in tube 6. All other tubes with plasma warheads, I demanded after checking the loadout from the Belus, and getting confused then angry. Whoever has heard of incendiary and atomic warheads preloaded as default? I mean, it was nice to have them, in case some place needed cleansing, but first one had to control the orbitals, which meant ship combat, which meant anti-ship torpedoes. Damn idiots. Where is Captain Idion? The voice on the Vox asked instead. I turned towards Rothan. Go there and shoot whoever doesn't listen. There's a big pyre for idiots in the hangar, might as well clean house while the fuel burns. To his credit, Rothan simply pounded his chest and ran off, loading his bolter, and checking his hip for sufficient ammunition. The neophyte at the Auspex console lowered his hand and stared at his black screen without asking the idiot question. Good enough. And then, I just waited, because barges are slow. Not doing nothing, as I did have a lot of things to check on the Belus, from secret vault rooms to concealed armories and ritual chambers for blood infusion, to the other systems, reactor and Gellerfield and weapon batteries. They all worked, but Belus was unhappy at the shoddy maintenance. There were 100 space fighters lying in disrepair, for lack of time or skilled workers. Hundreds of tanks and other vehicles with numerous problems, and the teleportarium haven't been repaired in 5,000 years. Nothing I could do right away, but there was a forge world right here, and plenty specialist tech priests already on the canticle. Then I felt a blood angel moving to stand by my side, and peek at the command holoscreen. Then again, most of the tactical consoles were blank now. Who are you? I asked without turning. Astartes Solus, Exo on the Belus. He answered curtly. All right Solus, you may stay, if I have questions not found in the machine spirit. I allowed generously. I could hear his teeth grinding. This is highly irregular, Lord Lancefire. We are flying blind right now. Solus muttered, possibly upset. Oh, you were not blind before? I changed my mind. Go oversee the torpedo room, Astartes Solus. The people there refuse to follow orders, I said in a soft voice, like talking about weather. Astartes were smart, but so naive it was cringing. Sanguinius reborn. No wonder entire chapters or legions fell to chaos. Brother Ludvius, today you are Sanguinius reborn. These morons will believe it, I can bet a throne on it. We'll see about tomorrow. I have a puppy with holy blood back on the canticle. Kids love him, so he must be Sanguinius, I proclaimed, pointing at my bodyguard. Solus grunted as if in pain and left the bridge, while Ludvius began posing heroically for his brothers. You heard Lord Peth. Today, you witness our Primarch, returned from death. -1 iron wings. He announced with his power maul held high. Everyone on the bridge seemed rather skeptic. As if they weren't ready to crucify me a few hours ago. Ludvius glanced around and holstered his weapon on his back. You owe me a throne, Captain. They didn't believe me, he added with a smug face. I ignored his demand for a bribery and relaxed in the chair. A few hours later, the fleet began to approach the torpedo limit. Battle stations. Heavy weapons, deploy on the larger hallways. Astartes, guard the Gela generator, the reactor and whatever else we may need to fly. Medical crew, prepare to receive wounded. And everyone else, pray hard. I ordered on the intercom vox. Then I started maneuvers to avoid getting targeted by long-range weapons, and fired 2 torpedoes at the nearest Chaos cruiser. Yorvis, same trick I sent to my escort destroyers. To their credit, in a minute the bridge received a dozen Astartes with full gear, ready to protect this vital part of the fleet, meaning myself. And then the torpedoes started flying, and I launched the fighters and plowed straight into the midst of the Chaos fleet, contrary to all tactical sense. There was a method to my madness, as pretty soon the Chaos battleships were hit by 50 torpedoes each and began drifting into the void, while my barge unloaded the other torpedoes in the batteries on the destroyers who just flew about without evading or dodging. The Belus rammed and simply crushed 3 Chaos destroyers without slowing down, and we arrived over Shenlong with half our void shields intact. In my wake, the Canticle followed and unleashed its own torpedoes and lances, blowing up the wounded ships, then turned at speed and departed to regroup with the destroyers below. My corvettes stayed with me, providing close support against torpedoes and bombers. Vox transmission from Shenlong, Captain. They need help to regain the shipyards and the orbital forts. Their remaining fleet is also forming up behind us, the Vox officer announced while writing down the text of the transmission in full. I nodded but did nothing. Launching an assault under fire would create more casualties, and might even prompt the traitors to suicide, just to kill a few Astartes in a blaze of glory. Yorvis, once again, on secondaries. I sent to my uncle while waiting for the torpedoes to reload. Didn't need to use the Vortex warhead with such overwhelming advantage, and a warp rift might provide the traitors with unexpected help, from someone or something interested in this system. An hour later, we struck again, this time with Belus escorted by the Mechonicus fleet, while the Canticle and the destroyers attacked from behind. It was a massacre, and nothing in the siege fleet survived. For once, the battle went as planned, with a battleship on my side. One day I will have one of my own, I promise. Once the battle was over, my escorts began the tedious task of incinerating whatever dregs still survived in the void, burning the corrupted wrecks with lance and plasma cannons, then pushing them into the sun. There was even a power-armored traitor marine with a force field around him, but 100 volcano lances from my corvettes made him convert back to the light. The Mechonicus protested a little, trying to recover some valuable tech or minerals from the Chaos wrecks, but I wouldn't risk it. Instead, I launched the servitors and a few tech priests, some Ogrins and a Katakan regiment with all the armed sentinels in support, to cleanse the orbitals of cultist and traitor invaders. The Blood Angels were only called where traitor marines were spotted, to prevent thousands of casualties to my own troops. They were appropriately brutal, and losses were total on the Chaos side, and moderate for our own. The liberation worked quite well, and we even saved a dozen docks and 3 orbital forts. However, 2 corrupted forts had to be torpedoed and lanced into oblivion, while my battlecruiser, the Canticle glassed a chaos-infested hive city from orbit, using only its powerful lances. Forge Shenlong got away with minor damage, from an invasion that should have conquered it easily. The Fabricator General knew that as well, and I was received like a holy savior, although a dozen Astartes around me helped secure my image too. Then we got to chatting in private and trading, and I unloaded 24 templates on him, including a cheap system-only Volcano pattern corvette and the Lima-class destroyer, both still with 30 torpedoes, but using twin Volcano cannons instead of single-barrel lances for its batteries and 100 quad multi-lasers for point defense. This type of ship, no wonder you massacred the traitors so easily. We could build a dozen of them in a few years. The red-robed Magus mused to himself. I would start with 1,000 corvettes. Use 10 docks to mass-produce them, while the other 2 docks complete the hulls you have already begun. The Bellis will stay to provide cover till you have a large enough fleet to defend yourself. I explained in a gentle voice, and drank the wine in deep thought. Having the system corvettes will prevent other admirals from taking them away, because they lacked warp engines. They also didn't need navigators, which were rare and expensive. The Fabricator had even better implants than mine, so he figured it out in a second. What about your favor, Trader Lancefire? Surely there are things we could offer? He inquired cautiously. I nodded and pointed at the cogitator screen. As many light vehicles as I can take. Chimeras and hydras, manticores and basilisks, rapiers, centaurs, and sentinels. And as many power armors as can be made for my void marines. He nodded and waved the screen away. Thousands of light vehicles were not a problem. Power armors, way too difficult to make in large numbers. Perhaps 20 or so. You have all those Astartes anyway. Also, 2 Lima-class destroyers to replace my losses, and full repair and supplies for my fleet. I added without pushing too hard. His forge world wasn't in a good shape right now. The Fabricator sighed and urged me on. Still too little then, so I could fill my plate more. This will only cover your liberation efforts. What about the sacred STC templates? He asked, more serious. This would take some thought. Force field templates, gravity weapons, better personal weapons for my regiments. Hunter-killer missiles and a forge factory to make more. Also servitors, engineers and tech priests that will fly with me into the fringe. You mean STC patterns? Not quite legal, such a trade, he whispered fearfully. I shrugged and smiled. Donations to an approved religion like the cult of the Omnissiah are tax-free. Aptus_non. The same with sponsoring an expedition outside the Imperium. If you have to name me an explorer, I have the right credentials. Magus Explorer Gyron from Antax has raised me till adulthood. What about a transport ship or two, like the other Forge worlds received? He demanded with a tiny bit of greed. Well, I did give everyone some, so why not to his forge? The man was correct and logical, in his cyborg brain. Forge Triplex Foul has priority on those adamantium transport ships. But, perhaps one such transport can be lost during transfer. It happens. I mused to myself wistfully. I see. Then perhaps, a few STC copies might be lost and then found by a lucky rogue trader. It happens. He answered on the same tone. You gotta love these Mechonicus guys. They have business in their blood. Not much blood though, unlike the Blood Angels. Something else. The Bellis battle barge is full of ancient machines, just lying there to rust. A smart fabricator could entice the naive giants to trade the relics for new and stronger machines, like fighters and tanks. Perhaps even offer to repair the teleportarium on the barge, and copy the holy schematics during the service litanies? I wondered without any ulterior motive. He waved a few metal tentacles in excitement. Indeed, Lord Pef. This would be quite valuable to the Mechonicus. We can offer to service and then copy the best technology in the Imperium. But they will not let us, I think. I grinned with secret knowledge. Oh, they will. Also, I need these rings scanned and copied, and then another thing. Phase iron mesh, micron scale, both for anti-psyker defense and psyker containment, like walls and tank armor. I explained, opening my chest box to retrieve the precious loot. Of course, my rosette blared at once with coded engrams, before the null box closed. That cog-shaped rosette, is it yours, Lord Pef? He asked cautiously. Made for me, by a friendly lady, just in case I got in trouble inside the Imperium. Ah, and I'll need you to send a traitor Inquisitor's body and his rosette back to Terra. In stasis, if possible. The Astartes shot him with phase iron bolts, but a great demon might be stronger. I explained in a relaxed voice. The fabricator was quite panicked though, understandably. That would be Ramius Steele, he voxed us when he arrived with the battle barge in the system. Correct? I'm not an expert, he could have been a clone or body double or something else. The Inquisitor killed an Astartes with some type of genetic curse. First he grew wings and got stronger, then his body failed and got full of pustules and things. They had to burn the poor boy, I declared in a sadder tone. It hadn't been pretty. The fabricator stared at me for a minute, likely going over my exact words and meaning. Well, at least I know why the Space Marines listen to you. This almost seems like corruption. He mused softly. Just rumors of corruption would be sufficient for an Inquisitor to declare them excommunicates Diabolus, and then wipe out their chapter. I nodded in agreement. Well, I am trying to find blank recruits for these cursed Astartes. They are pretty rare, but I have already sent 100 of them to Baal for implantation, and they seem to resist the curse without problem. Estobon and Riza are working on blank machine spirits with the same type of genes. In a century or two, we might not fear the enemy so much. I proclaimed in a grander voice, to raise his morale. I also held my palm out for a blank blood sample, which the fabricator collected in a mere second. Now this is big indeed. I wonder if that's why Lorga was here, waiting. He mused in worry. Probably not. There were too many troops and titans on those conveyors, just for your small forge world. I expect he was heading someplace else, and just stopped to check on his apostille. My lances blew him apart in seconds. I replied with a smug smile. If the Bellas could stay here for a decade, we would have at least 100 of these torpedo corvettes. Maybe enough to defeat a fleet just like this one. The fabricator said after running some calculations. Don't count on it, Margus. Imagine a billion Tyranids bioships. Then a Black Crusade. Then a galactic-scale Orkwog. Then a craft world or two. After that, a small Necron dynasty. Followed by a Brood migration. Soon after, a new Tau expansion. And so on. I rebutted him while pouring myself more wine. The fabricator blinked and glanced at his cogitator screen again. Right. You forgot other enemies, but I get the point. Ships and more ships. Once you have enough, they could be lined up like torpedoes in a universe class, with launch rails. And then, you'll be the one crusading with 1,000,000 ships. But first, you have to survive, fabricator. Don't count on me to save you again. I announced and sipped my wine a bit slower. You're leaving the Imperium. Probably for the best, considering how the Inquisition might react. He reasoned at light speed. Yes. And if you want, there will be a place for a splinter forge among my worlds. I don't intend to stop at 1,000,000 ships, with 1,000,000,000,000 stars and planets in this galaxy, I said and set my glass down gently. Yes, I can see it might work, if you don't get discovered too soon, Lord Pef. A small success is commendable. But grow too big. He warned me, as if I didn't know. I knew the risks, of course. Come visit the Canticle soon, fabricator. I have some items that might even the odds a little. I spoke more modestly, and prepared to leave. Omnissiah be with you, Pef Lancefire. I'll begin preparing the priesthood for the large tasks ahead, he declared solemnly as I crossed his threshold. I just nodded with sorrow. Perhaps he would survive now. At least I gave him a chance. A small chance. Gradually, as time passed and orders became easier to obey, I began implementing my personal projects with the Blood Angels. First replacing the broken machines and fighters with new and functional ones, even a few updated templates made by myself. Then upgrading the Auspex sensors and the Void Shield teleport deflection trick. And a year later, the more debatable things. Captain Idion had little choice but to submit to a minor repair of his barge, with the tech priests being escorted like criminals from one ship system to another. Not that they would know what and why the tech priests chanted and bowed and sprinkled oil or incense on some gun battery or targeting cogitator. It won't be so bad, Astartes. The cogheads know their machines, and Bellas is in a rather poor shape. Plus, I know very well that teleporting strike teams will be useful once the device is repaired. I explained and patted his shoulder. Not only this, but you're kidnapping 90 brothers from the company and implanting their heads with the Emperor knows what contraptions. He complained in a seething rage. Every one of you will be implanted, Astartes. Even yourself, since your minds are so weak that any cultist can manipulate you like puppets. Plus, the implants do help control the rage and the thirst, just as the phase iron dermal hoods will help defend against warp sorcery. I yelled at him and took out my rosette. The blazing light of the sacred cog made him draw back and mutter a prayer. Stop that. My head will explode. He growled as his eyes turned red and started weeping bloody tears. This artifact is the mark of the throne, Astartes. Who sits on that throne? I asked in a gentler voice and returned the damn mimetic device to its null box. The Emperor, he declared in firm conviction. And he is the most powerful psyker to have ever lived. More so now, empowered by the faith of a quintillion humans in the Imperium, praying to him every single day. Even so, the Aquila has two heads. Faith and reason. Blood and machine. I continued and drew my glove off. My left hand was slightly glowing, like it always did when the Emperor was mentioned. Every human is touched by the Emperor. Blank, or psyker or a lowly serf. Even the Ogrins know him, and he knows them. But you are still his son, blood of his blood, diluted as it is with silly blood rituals and genocides corrupted. When you pray, he listens because you are the closest thing to his family. He sends his angels in the hour of need. I whispered and covered my hand before someone else saw it glow. That wouldn't be healthy. Slowly, his rage drew back, and he glanced at my 70 implants with more respect. Twin Aquila, just like your Ogrins and their maces. I had been blind. He mused in a regretful voice. If I could, I would demand for all Astartes to train as tech marines first. Then medics and generals, ship captains and governors. There will be plenty brutal fighting, but only when you enter your dreadnought, I concluded and started to leave his quarters. We are not allowed to rule, outside our recruiting planets. He answered in a meek voice. Of course not. Big naive idiots without any common sense. You wouldn't let an Organ lead a sector, would you? I threw over my shoulder as the door opened. Ludvius passed a thrown coin to Raven. I told you they were not fighting, brother, Raven declared in a confident voice, then still checked me for scuffle marks. I ignored their childish games and headed towards the hangar. Soon it will be time to leave, with a large Astartes group as my bodyguards. Now I was slowly training their minds and teaching them to think, which was frustrating to say the least. 1,000 younger Katakans were selected as aspirant replacements, at my urging. Already big and strong and skilled in combat, the Katakans should survive the implantation in larger numbers than regular farm boys. And possibly adapt and thrive as space marines better than other people, especially after receiving the 7 implants and some schooling. Not on my dime, but the fabricator would have tech priests train their minds as well. Thracius and my armored void marines waited in the hangar, with my close blood angels right behind me. I take it the meeting went well, Captain? The Scythe asked to make sure. No punches, just harsh words, I said with a fake shrug. Not easy to do in power armor. I still don't trust them, no matter what penance vows they took, he declared in a cold voice, and glared at the gathered blood angels. I didn't either. I mean, sure they could laugh and joke and appear friendly. But even with hardwired restraints and phase iron inhibitors, they could still fall to their blood curse. And then I'd have a horde of bloodthirsty maniacs loose on my ship. Thus, the melter charges in their jetpacks, keyed to my implant control, just like the Ogrins. They really should learn what machines are for, silly brainwashed zealots. Very dangerous zealots, with combi bolters and power weapons and even heavier weapons in some squads. The Thunderfire cannon would clear a hallway of intruders in a single second of rapid fire. The Grav cannon would squash Chaos Marines in their cursed armor, leaving only a blood smear. Heavy flamers and the melter gun would deal with heat-susceptible enemies, pretty much all of them. Then the Terminator squads had the classic assault cannon but of high quality for longer combat service, and the frag cannon, shooting hollow shells which would fracture on impact with a myriad of adamantium shards. The new Lima-class destroyers were speeding around the system for their trials, and Forge Shenlong had begun producing the missile corvettes at full tilt, with 10 of them already operational and a second wave on the way. I was almost done here. My ship's Skeller generator was undergoing final checks, and a dozen tech priests were clustered inside for some special ritual of awakening, which probably means what you think it does. 2 of my daughters got to become destroyer captains, including the wonderful Larisa, who wouldn't let getting pregnant stand in the way of her rank. Katakan husband, as expected. Why not? These guys had solid genes, and my girls were prettier than the moon. I only had to hint at an available position and a dozen duels provided the faster and stronger candidates. Not much brains these warrior husbands, but my girls had more brains than me, and that should suffice for their children. And imagine I still had 20 more girls coming of age soon. The nursery was crawling with babies as well, because a year in doc was boring and I had a permanent teenager body. I was running out of available bedmates, so Decima recruited another batch to last me till I leave. Best wife ever, right? I was so lucky. She wore my old armor now, as to not waste it. And it should keep her a bit safer, for a minute of combat. Henna didn't want an armor, nor would she fit in a regular female carapace, due to enhanced glands. She got a flak robe and force field belt, and she wears my old hell pistol, so it evens out. Plus it's easier to disrobe Henna for a quick husbandry duty in my bedroom. Win-win. Canis got a savant implant too, and a combat collar with its own power shield, and now the Katakans train him to hunt like they do. Only he has grown a lot during this year and is larger than a pony. Kids love him anyway, as he gives the best rides. A shadow flashed and jumped on me like I expected. Luckily I had my armor, so he couldn't throw me down. Not yet. Hey Canis. Good boy? Woof. He answered and ran back to the horde of kids. I think he thinks my kids are his puppies. Spends more time with them than I do anyway. The blood angel transfusion is still working, and now grips my heart and neck. Soon enough, it will reach my brain and I admit I'm a bit wary. Those black rage fits would ruin my life very fast.